So if you're meeting an alien, let's say you travel to Mars, on SpaceX, Elon Musk, and you meet an alien. The alien's like, what is time? Jeremy, like, how would you explain that concept? If the alien had this primitive way to communicate through English, how would you explain time to an alien?
I would bring in memory, the idea of memory. So if we didn't have a memory, like we couldn't remember what happened yesterday or 2 minutes ago, we wouldn't be aware of time. But the fact that we feel as though we're progressing through something. So, we remember that we've been having this conversation, and the fact that we can remember that shows that there's something going on, like the passage duration, right? I also think that what's interesting is if you were to watch a baseball getting hit and leaving a ballpark, you can see, right? You can watch the clip of the baseball leaving the ballpark, and you can tell if it's being fast forwarded, if it's being rewound, because we can kind of see how it's progressing through time. So that's our ability to understand time.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, time is the lens that we're using to understand the way that objects in our environment interact
and unfold, right?
Unfold. But again, it's almost like, how do you explain without using time? Like unfold through time. You know what I mean? It's like
there's a sequence of events, right?
But the concept of sequence, if you define sequence, time.
No, but that's because we're basically, there's when things happen, the order in which they take place, that we can kind of gauge that time exists through that.
I get what it's almost like, you ever play Taboo, where you have to guess. That's my favorite game, where you have to guess, say the word grass, but you can't say mow, can't say lawn, can't say green. So what's interesting about time is the only real currency we have. It's limited, it's finite, it's relative, which we're going to talk a lot about. Sometimes it feels too slow, sometimes it feels too fast. It's impossible to capture, right? Like right now, if you take a moment to stare at the clock, it's 6:29 p.m. on, what's today's date? February 23rd or whatever. That's what time it is right now. And just like that, guys, it's gone forever. 6:29 and 30 seconds, 6:29 and 45 seconds. Now it's 6:30. Never again will it be 6:29 and 45 seconds on February 23rd ever again. Same thing, whatever time you're listening to this to, 1:30, 1:31. You cannot capture time, Jeremy. It's elusive. And so there are so many questions that this leads to about time. Is there any objective? I guess this is the first question I have for you. Is there any objective view of time, or is it only subjective? If we could pause time, and this is again very semantical, and step outside of it, right? Would we still see time, or does the subjectivity of time itself, is that a necessary component of the concept?
Well, I think that time is, again, how we interpret the sequence of events. So I don't think that you can really step outside of time. Mm-hmm. It's just a concept that we've created to explain why reality is the way it is.
It's a concept we've created to explain why. Okay, so when you say we create, so you're saying that humans created time. So did cavemen? And we don't have to get too much into anthropology, but did cavemen know about time? Before calendars were created by the Mayans. So before then, we just had primitive humans in the Neolithic era. Was there time? Did they know? I mean, they had the sun rising and falling indicated that it was a new day, but did they know what a day was? Did they know you know what I mean?
In their own primitive way, they did, and they had. I'm sure they had habits and routines that correlated to different times of day. Obviously, sleeping when it's dark, and they kind of can tell when that's coming. I mean, whether or not they were consciously thinking that's time, passing,
But then, I mean, the question becomes: do other beings have a sense of time? I mean, we talked about in episode 5. I don't know if you've listened yet, but in episode 5, AJ and I talked about consciousness in dogs and cats and birds, and some of it might, there might be it might be necessary for animals to be conscious to have time, but you have cats. Do you think your cats understand time going by? And we're not going to talk about specifics experiments, because we did that in episode 5. I'm just saying, generally speaking, do you think your cat knows I just wasted 5 minutes sitting here waiting for my food, or it's been hours since what I mean?
Well, I mean, cats, I know that my cats come around the food when I feed them. I mean, basically there's a time every day when I feed them.
There's a time every day?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
At 5 p.m. I'll give them dinner.
But what I'm saying is, do they know what 5 p.m. is?
They do to some degree, whether or not they call it 5 p.m.
So you think language is one of the
things
features
to discuss about? I mean, language is, it's just we're coining a term that explains the phenomena of time.
So would there even be time if we didn't have language?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, again, it's just the fact that things are happening in a certain sequence and progressing forward.
Right.
And that exists regardless if we talk about it or not.
And when you talk about the sequence and the forward movement, you know, what's interesting about time is that time only ever moves in one direction. It's one of the only variables, metrics that is asymmetrical. It's only forward moving. If you don't believe me, you know, try making an egg into an omelet and then go ahead and try to turn that omelet back into an egg. You know, you can't, because time moves one way, right? We fear things in the future, things that have yet to come, but we don't fear things in the past that already happened. One of the most interesting things that I've observed, and this, I took a class, I didn't mention to you, Metaphysics of Death in college, one of the most interesting experiences of my life. And one of the takeaways from the class that I still think about to this day, we fear death. We fear the period of life after which we will no longer exist, but we do not fear prenatal non-existence, the period before we were born when we do not exist. That doesn't make sense to me, because in both scenarios, we didn't exist. So time's forward moving. We only fear what's ahead. Why, why is that? How does any of this make sense?
I think that we're still around because the survival of the fittest. I mean, we have certain characteristics that made it so that we're still here after all these years. I think thinking about the future is a way to preserve the human race, right? As opposed to you don't think about being born because that's not productive. And then your comment about the egg, creating the omelet again, that there actually is, from a physics perspective, there's a probability of that happening, that you'll crack an egg, it'll open, and that it'll uncrack itself and go back in. It's just such a low probability that we never see it. And as a result, it isn't productive for us to think about that option because there's so many other things that are more pressing.
Can you speak more about that probability? If you want to, you can even go a little more in depth. There's a small probability of the omelet turning back into an egg?
I think it has to do with entropy and basically chaos is inevitable. I mean, things like to unfold and become more disordered, and for the egg to reappear into an egg, the yolk to come back in, I mean, that's just that's not very likely. And as a result, we don't think about that. I mean, there's a probability of that happening. I mean, again, the probability that the particles and all the positions of the shell and everything will be such that it returns to its normal uncracked state. That's just so low that we'll never see it.
And I don't want to get too much into this, but I don't know too much about string theory, but is this similar to if you want to run through a wall, there's a probability
Absolutely.
that you'll be able to get through the wall? That's the same thing? That's time, entropy,
and
chaos?
actually, a part of you does go through the wall. I mean, that's
Don't try this at home, folks.
Yeah, right. But again, for your entire body to pass through the wall at the same time is highly unlikely.
Right.
But if you had an electron, just one electron, it would actually go through the wall. And the way it does that is actually borrows excess energy from the universe and repays it later. And that's a concept that is further developed in string theory.
Really?
Yes.
Shoot, yeah, this is
interesting stuff.
Yeah, that sounds like that might be another conversation to have. But just my the thing that kind of baffles me about time is, as I said, it's elusive and you can't capture it, but also the present moment doesn't exist. I'm sure you've thought about this. And Jeremy and I have these conversations, literally it's 3 a.m. and we're just sitting on the phone. It's dude, there's no such thing as the present. Because so there's the past and the future. Those things actually exist in science, in language, in psychology. The past is an hour ago and the future is an hour from now. But there's no present, because the present is so dynamic and evolving, right? The present was now. And now it's now. And now it's now.
And
you can never sit down and capture the present.
Right. And our ability to even think about now, we're already, as we talked about, your brain makes decisions before you do. We're already in the future. I mean, it's hard to be exactly now. Like right now when I'm saying the word the.
Yeah.
That wasn't in the moment because my brain had already come up with the decision to do that.